Huh. Oh, hi there. I was just reading a manga. Actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about the strange tale of dead cities, and the curse that brought them to their knees, and down the memory hole. This is a tale only told by mute stones and mute bones. A tale of Dead at the Gate. Thousands of years ago, when the first signs of the blood moon started to manifest, the magnificence of Ansanun had already faded into a distant memory. Cut from its allies, crumbling from all directions under invasions by hostile barbarians, namely Uberians in the north, wolves in the south, dogs in the west, Ansanun and the whole Nomist Empire had already acquired a reputation of being an incredibly unhealthy and evil place. The few communications that could be maintained with other cities spoke of an unbearable stench. Piles of rotting corpses littering the streets, ritual murders, mass suicides, necrophilia, cannibalism, and other unspeakable acts. A literal cult of death. But the event that immortalized the city as a place forever cursed was its last military expedition. Similarly to Ansanun, the ruins of Got are remarkably well preserved given their age. No later civilization ever took over it, or razed the city, or even took its stones for their own buildings. It was left intact, avoided by all, to stand alone in the desert. For years the people of Got had failed to send to their liege the tributes they owed, on which Ankarnin's dwindling population was increasingly dependent. And for years, the Gotians waited anxiously for the consequences of this act of rebellion. Finally, one winter day, diplomats from Ansanun arrived. They looked so incredibly sickly and emaciated that their entrance immediately sucked all life out of the streets. Upon the slow, irregular passage, shutters and doors slammed. The horrified silence was interrupted solely by involuntary screams, and the ghostly music the diplomats' servants were playing. Terrified eyes glanced through the cracks at the delegation as it made its way to the king's palace. There they found no one to greet them, the gates were closed, and they remained like this. "Fools," they screamed, "do not think you can deny our city the tribute she now demands." After pronouncing these words, the diplomats all stabbed themselves in the stomach, and laid their dead, as did all their guards and servants. Moving the corpses was said to be a difficult task. The guts, that looked like they had been rotting for days in the sun, spilled everywhere, and some accounts say that the corpses were still moving, and kept moving for days after they were unceremoniously dumped in a nearby pit. Several months passed in fear after this event. And then, in the summer, a clamor filled the valleys with panic. An army was marching from Ansanun. And what an army! Witnesses described a horde of walking corpses brandishing macabre totems made of gold, skulls, bones, and dead animals. In their footsteps, the crops would rot, the trees turned gray, and grass fell to dust and ashes. Cattle were slaughtered and burned. People felt sickly and aged, and few managed to flee the region before dying. Several scouting parties failed to report back to the city. As all communications between Got and the outside world got cut off by the siege, the sources ceased to be reliable. All that is known for sure is the total extinction of all life in Got and the city's abandonment forever, joining its former liege in its curse. Archaeology has so far been able to determine only a limited understanding of the course of events. All the ancient tales insist that the army of Ansanun never entered the city. And indeed, some peculiar findings seem to corroborate these recollections. Spearheads and golden masks imitating skulls were excavated in abundance in the fields, and especially all around the walls surrounding the city, but none within the ruins themselves. Where only piles of equipments and skeletons attributed to the defenders and population of Got were found, it appears that the entire army died, either pierced by Gotian archers or by their own swords. The only detail contradicting this theory is the fact many of the defenders and civilians appear to have suffered a violent death as well. Legends say that, although the army of Ansnan never entered the city, the disease of their minds had no trouble piercing the walls and decimating, in turn, the defenders, who started killing each other's, their own families, and themselves, or letting themselves die. For centuries, this was interpreted as some kind of pestilence, but modern science is currently exploring the meaning behind this insistence of ancient sources on the term disease of the mind. Did the Gotians exterminate themselves in order not to fall into the hands of their enemies, fearing a worse fate? Or was it an orgy of death, as some sort of sick conversion, a victory for Ansnan? In the following years, neighboring cities were too busy with their own defenses to give the time of day to those wanting to destroy the cursed city of Ansnan. Only 100 years later would an expedition from the rising Zetian kingdom come any close to this, pushing invading Uberians back in the northeast and burning down settlements populated by ghoulish creatures. They found a deserted city on which the shadow of death reigned. Dominated by statues of deities with rotting, skeletal faces, they pulled out as fast as they had come, and let the city be forgotten.